We have a record-setting 35 questions to get into in our mailbag segment, so let's dive into that next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. And some big news here at the Locked On Royals community is that we jumped into the top 100 on Apple Podcasts among baseball podcasts in America, right now at number 85. So if you continue to rate us, continue to download, continue to listen, we're going to shoot up those charts, which you really hope to do. We've seen tremendous growth since we took over this podcast back in late June. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Get your picks in before the Final Four starts. That's going to be coming up tomorrow. And then, of course, the national championship game will be on Monday, and PrizePicks has some great deals for you, but we're going to tell you about that coming up in about 15 minutes or so. As always, questions and comments can be left on YouTube or they can be left on Twitter. And for days like this, Twitter's probably the best way to reach me. I always put out a Mailbag Friday tweet, and then everybody responds right below it, and that's usually where I gather all of the questions. Sometimes if you send it too early on YouTube, I'm not going to be able to go back and look at it, or I just forget to. That's probably more so on my end than yours. But the best way to do it, if you do have Twitter, reach out to me. It doesn't need to be public either. You can direct message me. My messages are open. So if you're not really comfortable putting your username out there, you're not comfortable having your question right next to everybody else's, I always will answer that either in this episode or I'll answer it directly if you didn't want me to address you in the podcast episode. But we have about 28 minutes. And with some of the live reads that we do, a little bit less than that, we have 35 questions to get into. So that's another record for the Locked On Royals podcast. Let's not waste any more time and kick it off with question number one. This comes from Nick. This team's offense seems to feast or famine. If they average out these performances, is it enough to win the division? And do you think they can? I will disagree there. I do not think it's feast or famine. Honestly, through the first 7 games, I think the offense has been pretty good. I know the first 2 games is what everybody remembers, but in that Baltimore series, I didn't think the offense was bad at all. I thought they were good enough in game 1 and game 2. They were good enough for Alec March, and in game 3, they're facing an ace and a Cy Young candidate and a Cy Young winner and Corbin Burns, and they got 9 hits off of him. 9 hits. He only had 3 strikeouts, and Cole Reagans absolutely outdueled Corbin Burns. So to me, you look at last Sunday's barrage of runs of 11, and then you get 10 last night against Chicago. This offense is doing a lot better than I think people expect. I mean, they are hitting the ball incredibly hard, not just Bobby Witt Jr., and that's a difference a little bit from last year. Last year, they were hitting the ball hard, but they weren't really lifting the ball. You're seeing a lot more home runs this year because there seems to be this tendency of the Royals lifting it and hitting the ball hard. Now MJ's on the board. Nelson Velasquez is crushing it. Bobby Witt Jr. is crushing it. Salvy's crushing it. Kyle Isbell's hitting pretty well. Even some of your bench guys are doing okay. Hunter Renfroe, back-to-back days with a hit. So you're starting to feel a little bit better about where this offense can be, but I don't think it's feast or famine. I think right now they're doing pretty good. Now, I understand where you're getting at, where it's 3 runs or 10 runs or 2 runs or 11 runs. That can, by definition, be feast or famine. But we all know it is going to even out over a course of 162 games here. So to me, I think this offense is better equipped to have better stretches than they did last year. When they're cold, I think they're going to have the pitching to hang around in a lot of games here. So will that win the division? I mean, they keep it up like this, they're absolutely going to be in the hunt later on in September. Of course, it's just 7 games in, but if I have to make a prediction, things are looking like this. It's going to be hard not to see them competing later on in the second half. Matt asked, remember when Keller was our savior? He had to come a long way. Oh, yeah. That was a long time ago when we thought Brad Keller, a Rule 5 pick, was going to be the next ace of the Royals. And I don't know where Brad Keller is now in terms of AA or AAA, probably AAA in the Chicago White Sox organization. But glad that he is not considered to be the savior anymore, and there's much better options out there. Next one comes from Brody. Would you move MJ into 3-hole until Vinny gets right? Again, with the small sample size in 7 games, I look at what MJ's doing, and he seems comfortable in that spot. I think he seems comfortable in the 5 spot. I'm not willing to move him up to number 3 just yet. No, I think we fall for that a few times where if a guy's really hitting well and somebody at the top of the lineup is struggling, it's like you just want to swap them. I think that's better for guys swapping 8 to 7 and 7 to 8 or 7 to 6 and 6 to 7. But Vinny's in a really big spot in this lineup. I think he's right there. The numbers don't look good right now. I'm not going to make too many excuses for him, but he's one of those guys that it's only going to take a few games for him to get right. Hoping it is tonight. I'm going to be out there at Kauffman Stadium. Hopefully we see Vinny's first home run of the season. Maybe I should call it right now and just put my neck out there. So maybe I will. Vinny Pasquantino homers tonight, but I don't think there's a need or a rush to switch them in the lineup. When you're piling up runs, there's not really a need to change up the lineup too much. Next question comes from Bobbert. Could Sauer emerge in an 8th inning closer role? He's got the velo and the stuff is nasty straight from AA. Like, shouldn't scare us a lot since lots of others come from AA as well. I like what Matt Sauer's done, but Matt Sauer's also only pitched in blowouts. So to make that jump from low leverage spot to high leverage spot, we're going to need to see a couple of in-between outings, like where he's got to come in the 2-run game in the 7th or a 1-run game in the 8th. That's what can win over the job. Speaking of Brad Keller, who was just brought up, that's how Brad Keller got the setup role for a little bit. It was early on before he jumped to the rotation because the rotation was so damn bad in 2018. But he had to go in some of those spots where it was 2-1 or tie game, and he flourished in it. So Matt Sauer would need to do that. But right now, I think they feel comfortable with him in long relief. Not going to rule it out, but wouldn't expect it anytime soon. Ballistic Bubic asks, with the rotation looking so good, what happens to a guy like Bubic who looked good before the injury last year? Well, I said this after Alec Marsh's start. If this rotation's healthy, I don't see anybody that is cracking their way into it. Not Daniel Lynch, not Chris Bubic. And Chris Bubic's spot probably would be in this bullpen regardless, because you're going to think about the buildup and what a guy's going to look like after Tommy John. I mean, you're hoping that these are the 5 guys you work with. No, over 162, some guys are going to miss starts. But to me, when Bubic comes back, so I believe the timeline is in June, I think they're going to look to him when what Chris Medlin was for the Royals in 2015. Long relief, might have a spot start here and there, but I do not believe that they are going to force him into the rotation. I don't think he's going to have the stuff to play in that rotation. Next question comes from Joseph. When do you think Prado plays? Well, after the way Nelson Velasquez looked last night and Hunter Renfroe hitting in back-to-back days, there's just not a spot for him to play every day right now. I know Vinny's not playing well, but the Royals are not punting on Vinny Pasquantino being their first baseman after 7 games. There just isn't going to be a roster move for quite some time unless there's an injury. I think the Royals want who they have up there to perform well. And nobody wants to hear this, but there could be a scenario. I'm just saying there could be. I have no inside information on this. I'm just simply making a guess. If the Royals are contending at the deadline and Nick Prado's hitting his tail off in AAA, he's blocked. We see contenders all the time trade guys who are blocked at the big league level, and I wouldn't be shocked for them to trade him for a bullpen guy or something like that. But right now, there's just not a spot for him on this roster. If Nelson Velasquez was struggling more, I think they'd make the switch. But after last night, he's clearly been able to take this in stride, and strikeout numbers have still been there, but with the power numbers and the walk rate going up a little bit more, he's not getting moved out for Nick Prado. Next question comes from Braden. Who do you think should fill the closer role in the wake of Smith's struggles? McMillan, Klein, and Hernandez, when healthy, are all on the table. Absolutely. I think all 3 of those fireballers or those power arms are good options. But I think if they are going to make the pivot, it'll go to James McArthur. James McArthur hasn't looked great, but the swing and miss stuff is still there. I think it plays better. He's also got good closing experience. Will Klein will not come up here to be the closer. I think he would be a bridge gap guy. John McMillan right now is sitting like 94, 95, so clearly something's off there, and that is concerning for sure. And then you look at somebody like Carlos Hernandez, great stuff, but he struggled in the closer's role last year. When Barlow left, Carlos Hernandez was not good whatsoever in that role. I think he'd be much better suited for a 6th or 7th inning role, and I'd expect him back pretty soon. But if Will Smith is getting moved out of that spot, which maybe they're going to go more closer by committee now, I'd imagine James McArthur is going to get his healthy amount of looks out there in the 9th inning. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. We still got plenty more questions to get into and probably need to answer them a little bit quicker. So let's do that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, want to give a shout out to one of the sponsors today in Factor Meals. Eat stress-free this spring with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from a weekly menu of 35 options, including popular options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. Also discover more than 60 add-ons every week, like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks, and beverages to help you stay fueled and feel good all day long. What are you waiting for? Get started and fuel up for your springtime goals. So you can head to factormeals.com/LockedOnMLB50 and use code LockedOnMLB50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box. That's code LockedOnMLB50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnMLB50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active. The other sponsor that we want to give a shout out to today is the title sponsor in PrizePicks. We all know that the Final Four is right around the corner, so you want to get set up with PrizePicks. Spring training is also over and baseball season is officially underway, so don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your PrizePicks entries. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, take your pick of more or less and add them to your PrizePicks entry today. You can also get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. And those playoffs begin April 20th, the play-in rounds being April 16th, 17th, and 19th over at PrizePicks. Well, we got 20 plus more questions to get into. Let's start it off with Eli, who asked a very similar question to Braden. How soon until we see Klein and McMillan? Any other sleepers that could help the pen later in the season? I'd imagine McMillan is going to be a little bit longer. Like I said, the velocity is not really looking that great right now, and he's still trying to get built back up. Will Klein, I think we could see him as early as May or June because the bullpen struggles. Walter Pennington is absolutely going to be the guy that I would say is a sleeper to help this bullpen. Other than that, though, I'm not sure if there's a guy that pops to me. Sam Long was great in spring training. I'd imagine we'll see him at some point. Tyler Duffy, I'd imagine we'll see at some point. So maybe those are the collection of guys I would throw in there as quote-unquote sleepers. Next question comes from Jamie. How do you think the bullpen is going to work out? Do you think we'll go out and get a true closer? If the Royals are in contention, I think they would look into it. But I also think if this bullpen evens out a little bit, which I still believe it will, and James McArthur maybe emerges as a closer or John Schreiber emerges as a closer, I don't think they'd go out there and add one because the asking price is going to be a little bit high, and I'm not sure the Royals would want to give up prospects. I really would think if the Royals are in contention, you'll see a very similar deadline as what they did in 2013 and 14 with kind of staying pat with the guys they had. They might have some minor waiver wire pickups or minor trades, but I wouldn't expect anything big if they are in contention coming up in June or July. Next question comes from KC Preds fan. Assuming it doesn't improve at all over the course of the year, do we consider the bullpen problem a simple fix for the offseason or a sign of serious development issues when it comes to that side of the roster? I don't think it's a developmental thing because you look at somebody like Carlos Hernandez early on last year. That was pitching development. He got a lot better. James McArthur, absolutely pitching development. The guys that are struggling are proven veterans, guys that have been around for a long time. Will Smith, Nick Anderson, Chris Stratton. Those guys aren't getting developed, I would say. And they're helping those pitchers, but it's not like they're crafting them. These are who these guys are. Sometimes they're just past their prime. I think Will Smith is past his prime. His velo's down and stuff like that. But for next year, maybe it's an emphasis to look at harder throwing guys with better stuff. You can mold into what you like, but it's still very early. I think this bullpen is going to get much better as the season progresses. I could be bit by that. That could be a cold takes exposed. There's just too many proven guys out there for it to be this bad early on. But they also got to prove it. I'm not just going to keep giving them excuses. They got to go out there and actually show that they're much better than what they've been through 7 games. Next question comes from Mark. Did that home run by Melendez remind you of Haas when he got back in 14? I think that they have somewhat of a similar swing. I do believe MJ's got far more power than Haas ever did. I think Haas is a better pure hitter, or in his prime with the Royals was a much better pure hitter, and that's not a hot take at all. I mean, MJ hasn't put together a full, complete, great season just yet. He hasn't been an all-star before. But in terms of raw power and athleticism, I'd have to give it to MJ. I mean, we have seen a really good start for him through 7 games, and I'm not doing victory laps for my MJ breakout season, but compared to what he looked like in April last year, this is definitely a good sign that he's feeling more comfortable. He's made those adjustments, and you combine that with what he did in the second half, hopefully you can get some form of an Eric Hosmer season where you can maybe be considered for an all-star vote or two. But yeah, MJ, great start through 7 games. SPP asks, is a move similar to the Will Myers trade for the last missing pieces possible? And if so, would it be somebody like Blake Mitchell? It's a very interesting question. I like it a lot. I don't think so. I don't think the Royals would make a move like that again, because you go back to what that time period represented. The Royals felt like they were on the cusp, and they were coming off another 90-plus loss season. So they needed to make moves quickly to get fans on their side. And that was a move that didn't sit well with a lot of fans. I mean, if you followed the Royals back then, the Will Myers trade was not appreciated by the fans, because James Shields was a great pitcher, but he wasn't seemed to be worth it for a guy like Will Myers, who was the prospect of the year, the best prospect the Royals had ever had. But this year, I don't think the Royals would make a move like that. Also because of this. Will Myers was baseball's best prospect. Blake Mitchell's barely in the top 100. So I don't see a move like that happening. And if the Royals are competing, there's not a need to rev up that process or to go out there and really force the issue on trying to get a big name starter for a young prospect or one of your best prospects. I would say the Royals are going to try to stockpile their farm system a little bit more than they have in years past. But love that question. Brett asked, who has impressed you from the bullpen so far, and who from the bullpen has disappointed you? This one's easy. I'd probably say John Schreiber and Matt Sauer have impressed me, and then Will Smith has really disappointed me. Will Smith had the closer's role, and he's been a disaster so far. I hope he can have a couple of clean outings in a row to erase the memory of what happened in Baltimore, but he's going to have to go out there and do it. As I just said with the bullpen, I can't keep giving excuses. These guys have to prove that they're still worth a spot in that bullpen. Next question comes from Tom. Can we just embrace closer by committee, match up with Schreiber, Smith, MacArthur, and use guys in spots to be successful? Feel like that's what Tampa Bay did when Q was there. Yeah, Tampa Bay just had much better bullpen arms, had guys with much more electric stuff. I think the problem right now is the 2 lefties in the bullpen just aren't that great. I'm fine with Angel Serpa. He got his one out, the one he needed to get last night. He's done better than Will Smith, but Angel Serpa's never really pitched in high leverage before, and Will Smith has, but he's also old and his stuff doesn't look that good. Closer by committee would be fine if you had a much better lefty. To me, I would just give the spot to James MacArthur. I think he was at his best last year when he was in that 9th inning role. I think he will get better in a spot like that. So to me, that would be my pick. But for closer by committee, those would absolutely be the options in Schreiber, MacArthur, and Will Smith, unless somebody else emerges that we haven't talked about too much just yet. Lane asks, which starter's outing has been the most impressive to you out of the 7 games? Either Cole Reagans in Baltimore on Wednesday or Alec Marsh. I mean, I was so impressed with Alex Marsh in those conditions against that lineup. He was the one guy I just wasn't that sure of what he was going to give you. And he's been phenomenal, or was phenomenal for one start. But Cole Reagans also, I mean, my goodness. Out-dueling Corbin Burns like that, he looked unhittable. Absolutely unhittable. The only hit he gave up was a bloop double by Adley Rutschman. Like, he's just, aside from that Royce Lewis home run and that Carlos Correa double, nobody's hit him that hard. And he's getting lots of swings and misses. I mean, he's clearly looking like an early Cy Young candidate for the Kansas City Royals. Next question we got here comes from Mike. With the forecast looking rough for Saturday, any chance the team moves the game earlier to 2 to 3 hours? That I'm not an expert on. I thought it just looked windy. It was like 70 degrees and windy. I could be wrong. It could change at any point. If that were the case, maybe they could play it 2 to 3 hours earlier. We saw Baltimore go to great lengths to make sure that the Royals didn't have to come back and play in Baltimore for a 1-game getaway game. To me, though, I'm just not too much of an expert on that. If the game is in peril or the game is in danger of being canceled. I would imagine with it being the White Sox, it's pretty easy just to postpone that and attach it to a 3-game series at Kauffman Stadium later on in the year. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we're going to answer the final questions we had from our mailbag. Before we do that, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We still got about 10 or so questions to answer, so let's take a quick break and come back right here on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, want to give a shout out to the third sponsor today in Robinhood Retirement. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you can transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. Their offer is good through April 30th, so get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. Okay, let's get back to our questions that we have here from the mailbag. The next one comes from Coke Reagans. If bullpen gets over their slump, is this a playoff team? I mean, through 7 games, it would be hard to argue with the way the rotation has looked, the way the offense has looked. I mean, this has been a very good group. I think a very underrated team through 7 games. They have a plus 13 run differential. That should tell you that they are much better than what their record shows, even with a small sample size. Bullpen figures it out here in April. I mean, I said the goal should be 14-18 through this brutal 32-game stretch they had to begin the year. Maybe you're shooting out for 500. I think it could be in the cards. You've got 3 more against the White Sox. You've got the Mets coming up in your next road trip, and they're 1-5 and look ghastly right now. Then you travel also to Chicago to take on the White Sox again. There is a good opportunity for this bullpen to build up some confidence. But right now, I'd have to think if the bullpen does figure it out, they're going to be winning a lot more games than we were used to in the last couple of years here. Tyler asks, with Vinny struggling, would it be good to switch him in MJ's position in the lineup? Yeah, we got this a little bit earlier. Not your fault, Tyler. Just I'm sure a lot of people have had the same question. I do not see a need to switch them just yet. MJ's hitting well in the 5-hole. That's a good spot for him. And I think Vinny gets going. I think it gives also, somebody like Bobby Witt Jr. some protection. When Vinny gets going, that's going to help Bobby Witt Jr. And he's been MVP level already. But if Vinny gets going, I mean, the top 3, the top 4, the top 5 actually in that lineup would be just tremendous. You would be very satisfied with the top 5. And then you just hope 1 or 2 guys like a Nelson Velasquez and Kyle Isbell give you enough at the bottom half that you feel good about that lineup. So, yeah, I don't see any lineup switch happening just yet. Next question comes from Nick. How sustainable is the starting pitching? Obviously, they're not going to be this good all season, but realistically, how good they can be. I would imagine they can still be top 10 in the AL, maybe top 7 in the AL, which would put them, middle of the pack in baseball. I mean, Cole Reagans is going to be Cole Reagans. I think Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha can give you close to what they gave you last year, which was a 3.2, 3.4 ERA, which you'll take in a heartbeat. Alec Marsh might have some games he regresses a little bit, and Brady Singer is going to have some games that he regresses a little bit. But overall, I think this rotation has good enough stuff to be really good. I'm not reading into this as, they're eventually going to implode. They've been really good. They've been the best starting rotation in baseball. That's probably not going to be the case long term. But I also haven't seen anything that shows signs of regressions, even through 7 starts. They're really close. They're tightly grouped together. Every picture you see of them, they seem close, and they seem to be building it and competing off of that. Hey, who's going to have the next best start? And excited to see what Brady Singer gives you tonight at Kauffman Stadium. First pitch tonight will be at 6:10, I believe, p.m. Central Time. Next question comes from, where was my place? Jason, should Garcia be a player that we should consider signing long-term now? Well, I would say yes, but I'm not sure what type of money they have set aside for certain players. I feel like they want to sign an extension for Cole Reagans. I feel like if Vinny can get going, they'd love to have Vinny around. But Mike Hell's now put himself in that conversation. So you're going to have to pick and choose which guys you do want to lock up long term. I would look into it. I think that Michael Garcia is going to be better than Vinny Pasquantino. I think Vinny Pasquantino is a safe bet and probably could get him a little bit cheaper. But Garcia, I mean, he's starting to show just the type of player that he can be. So, yes, I would start looking in to locking him up long term. Daniel asks, what's the ceiling for this offense, especially once Vinny gets out of his slump? I would say it can be a top 10 offense in the AL as well. They're never going to be that high OBP group, but they seem to have a very high-powered team. They hit the ball incredibly hard, and they're launching the ball. That's going to go a long way with this group. And that's exciting to see. I absolutely believe there are multiple guys in this lineup once they break out of their slump. I'll throw Hunter Renfroe in there that can make this lineup even scarier than it is right now. It's a pretty good offense so far through 7 games. You take out those first 2 against Minnesota, they've been really, really good over the last 5 games or so. Next question comes from Ben. When do we start having the conversation about Vinny? I'm assuming this means to bench him or to get rid of him or to just give him some time off. Not there yet. They definitely know that Vinny Pasquantino is a long-term piece for this team. They believe in him. They think he's going to be really good. I'm not too worried about it. He started slow before. He started slow last year. That was due to his injury. I don't think this is injury related. I just think that he's really trying to pull the ball a little bit. And he's even said himself, he's really going well when he's hitting line drives over shortstop. And right now it's just not happening. Really trying to pull the ball, and he's seeing a lot of breaking balls. If he can spit on those and he's got a good eye at the plate, I think he's going to be just fine. There's no need to have a conversation about Vinny right now. Oh, yeah, we still got a lot more questions to get into, so let's wrap them up really quickly. Sorry for those that asked them a little bit later on, but we've only got about 2 minutes here. Paul, is Lofton or Blanco the odd man out when Massey returns? Massey needs to play the majority of the games. It'll be Lofton. That's my guess right now, just because Lofton made the team because Massey got hurt. So it's not going to be Blanco. They love what he provides as a 4th outfielder. Evan asks, how do you think the Royals' new strategy of just scoring as many runs as possible to avoid the bullpen struggles is working? I would imagine that they feel pretty good about this offense, giving them a 9-run cushion going into most games. But we all know that eventually they're going to have to win a 1-run game again, and the 2-run game if they are going to be competing late in the season. Aiden asks, is it the pitchers and the bullpen that are the problem, or is it the bullpen coach having a poor game plan late? It's probably the bullpen guys. I don't think a bullpen coach is doing anything wrong there. These are veterans. These are guys that have to go out there, get out, get the job done, and grab the W. Right now, they're not doing it, but I still have faith with as proven as they are. They can be guys long-term to really lock this thing down and provide a lot more wins than they have through 7 games for Kansas City. Next question comes from Briley. Could Matt Sauer ever be that closer we've needed? He can throw upper 90s, and although it's super early, he hasn't given up a run. Yeah, take some time with him. He's only pitched in long relief. I'd like to see him maybe in some closer games, but that's more of Matt Quattro's plan. I mean, he made the jump from AA to the big leagues. I'd build up his confidence first, then start giving him those high leverage roles later on in the season. Cameron asks, any thoughts on the no vote for the stadium? Could this mean the Royals move out of KC? Not there yet. I don't think they move out of KC. We'll see what happens. I saw John Sherman's wife's post on Facebook. It's just a mess of a situation right now, but I'm not concerned about the Royals moving out of KC or out of state right now. I'll just see where it all goes from that. It's just a mess of a situation. It's a weird thing to talk about, but I'm not overly concerned right now. Hopefully the Royals and Chiefs can come out with a much better proposal than they did the first time around. Next question comes from Nick's letter. Is there any time frame for the Amazon broadcasting? Unfortunately, guys, still no word on that. It's been radio silent for quite some time. If I hear anything on it, I will be sure to promote that in the podcast and promote that on my Twitter account. Next question comes from RB Carr. I am a Zerpa guy, but he's really the fireman right now at the bullpen. Not the fireman. I think that's John Schreiber, but he is a guy before the 9th inning. If there's a lefty-lefty matchup they want, it has to be Angel Serpa. There's only 2 lefties in the bullpen, and it's Serpa and Will Smith. Spoons asks, when are we going to see Tyler Gentry starting in right field? How long the starting spot leash for Hunter Renfroe? Hunter Renfroe is going to be out there for a chunk of this season. Tyler Gentry is a good piece, but kind of like with Nick Prado, not a spot for him right now. JC Retro Athletics asked Daniel Lynch to the bullpen. No, I don't see Daniel Lynch at this point getting into the bullpen. It'd have to be a couple injuries. The stuff just isn't that impressive right now and good enough for even Kansas City's bullpen. I think Serpa's lefty they want, and he's got better stuff, and he's a better fit in that bullpen as the lefty specialist over Daniel Lynch. Eli asks if this team is in possession of a wild card spot or their division lead. Do they go all in and acquire maybe a bat or a bullpen arm, or do they let it ride for the future like the O's did? We'll have to see how in control they are, but it would be their first year in contention in 7 years. So I don't really think there's a need to go all in unless your window's closing. To me, this could mean the Royals window is just opening up. So maybe you only add a couple of pieces. You're not giving up too much. I would not see an all-in approach. And lastly, Christian asked, if you had the chance to make 3 moves to improve this roster, what would you do? Let's say add Carlos Hernandez, add Will Klein, and let's say add Sam Long to the bullpen. 3 bullpen guys. Who would that leave out? Oh, man. That would probably result in some DFAs. But right now, I can't add anybody to the lineup. Fine with the lineup, fine with the rotation. So I don't think there's really this huge need to improve anything other than the bullpen. So those would be the 3 guys I'd add in. Who knows who that would kick out, to be honest with you. I'm not really sure at that point. Would that mean Will Smith is on his way out or goes to the injured list, a phantom IL stint? Does that mean somebody like Nick Anderson? I don't know. But those would be the 3 guys I would add if it were my choice. But that'll probably happen a little bit later on in the year. Right now, can't complain. 3-4 plus 13 run differential. Feel good about where this team is at. And that is going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Before we say goodbye, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV Channels app. We are going to have a couple days off here, of course, with it being the weekend. And then when we come back on Monday, the Royals will have an off day, but we'll have a complete recap of what happened in that series against the Chicago White Sox. If you're going out to Kauffman Stadium tonight, take a picture and send it our way. We're going to be out there enjoying the game. I'll be out there with some buddies. So hopefully another Royals win, and they can move to 500 on the season. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.